Hello, welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we support dubs or subs. Watch how you want. I'm Jeff Grizzolrich, and I am joined as always by my Notre Dame brother, Josh Bradley.
Hello, go Irish.
And our other co-host is Evangelion superfan Hugo Panay.
Sure, I suppose I'm the most fan of Evangelion here.
I don't get it.
Well, yes, that's kind of the point.
Me neither. That's the point. I don't. Nobody gets it.
No
I
one
don't
gets
think the
Evangelion,
creators get
Josh.
it. It's like-
That's kind of the point of the
messed
episode,
up.
though. Josh has seen many movies, as has been made readily apparent throughout our show. But there's one genre that he has admittedly not seen a ton of, and and there might even be more than one genre that he hasn't seen a ton of. But this one is one of them, and that genre is anime films. I am an avid anime fan, and Hugo has seen quite a bit as well. He says that he's not quite as big a fan as I am, but that remains to be seen. But yeah,
it's not so much that I'm not as big a fan. It's just that I haven't seen as much as you. I've only started getting into it a bit more recently, I think.
So we thought it would be a cool topic to kind of do like an intro to anime films with Josh here. So we're giving him a solid taste with a couple of like classic or modern classic anime films, so that he can kind of give us a fresh view on the genre. So we're going to start off with a brief discussion on anime and our experiences with it, and then we will go into our film to remembers, which are Your Name from 2016 and Perfect Blue from 1997.
Have we decided how to pluralize film to remember? Are we going with film to remembers?
Films.
Are we going with coals to sack?
Films to remember?
Mothers-in-law?
I mean, it definitely should be films to remember, but I think it's funnier to say film to remember.
Yeah, no, I'm on board. So film to
Well,
remember.
if it's a title, it can be Film to Remembers.
Well, let's make the executive decision right now. Film to remember with hyphens is its own word. So to
Yes,
plural,
it's a
film to
thing.
remembers. Yeah, I'm on board. Yeah,
Executive
fine.
decision
That sounds great.
approved. We have a quorum. Okay, so the main topic is we're going to start with our first experience with anime. So I'll go ahead and throw it to Hugo to kick us off. What are your experiences with anime films and anime in general?
Well, surprisingly enough, I think a lot of people start getting into anime films from anime TV, generally at least. I think that's sort of a gateway. As a kid, you watch a lot of, anime such as, the classic Dragon Ball, or if you're older, or if you're younger, you watch Naruto or whatever it is. And then you sort of get into the weirder stuff, and then you start getting into the films as a genre. But for me, it kind of wasn't that way. I did watch anime as a kid, just because it happened to be on TV, but I didn't even have a concept of, this is anime versus this is a cartoon. Like, to me, they were just animated cartoons, and I watched them because I was 8 years old, so I didn't know any better. And I kind of started getting into Japanese animation films much later in life. It's only in the last 3 or 4 years that I've become interested in it, and I've started watching from the classics, from the Ghibli films, from I'm a big sci-fi fan, so obviously I watched Akira and Ghost in the Shell, that type of stuff. I've watched Evangelion, obviously, as I said. But it's kind of a genre that I've discovered a bit later than a lot of anime fans, I think, usually do. But yeah, and I'm sort of going through it slowly over the years right now.
So
how did you discover it?
Yeah.
Well, I think the gateway for me was Akira, probably, even though it's not necessarily one of my favorites. But there was the local theater in the city I used to go to university in before COVID, sort of does repertoire cinema. It takes cinema from all over the world and puts it back on the big screen. So at some point they did an Akira screening, and I was like, oh, this is a classic. I'm a big sci-fi fan. It's kind of weird that I haven't seen this. And so I went to see it there, and I really enjoyed it. It's not necessarily one of my favorites, but I really enjoyed it at the time, and that was when I started wanting to see anime more. I also kind of I think I also saw some of the Miyazaki films when I was younger, but they at the time they were kind of disturbing to me, kind of scary, even though they're not really scary, but some of the imagery for
Some of it
like,
is
for a
scary.
6, 7 year old.
it's kind of
Spirited
haunting.
Away has some like moments you're like, oh,
Yeah. Spirited
God, my
Away
pigs are
specifically
parents.
is the one. I think one of my teachers took our class to see it, and to me it was really disturbing as a kid. I was like 7 years old at the time, so I think that kind of put me off of that kind of stuff. But I rediscovered it later.
So I'll go ahead
So
and
yeah,
jump in with.
what about you, Chris? Because
Yeah.
obviously you're the one.
I watched anime television shows like Dragon Ball Z was one of the main ones. The Pokemon anime. I watched those from a
Yep.
very young age, and it was weird in that I didn't actually think of them as being any sort of different than the Western cartoons I was
Same.
watching. They were just additional cartoons. So it wasn't until I got into like high school and I on one of our band trips, the high school marching band, going to a competition somewhere. On the bus, we watched Spirited Away, and I was like, "What is this? This doesn't sound good to me," because it was described. Oh, it's super weird. She gets into this other realm and whatever. So I was skeptical of it, but then I really loved Spirited Away, and that got me interested in watching more of these Japanese animated films because I've been a Disney kid. I watched every Pixar movie as it was coming out, opening weekend in theaters. Animation is one of the like things that is like a foundational text for me, as Josh likes to say. I loved animated films growing up, and in a large part because of my dad. My dad, he saw every Disney movie that he could in theaters. And it's one of those things that he would take my mom to go see those movies and things like that, and then we watched those as kids. So it's just like a family thing was animation. So then that translated when I started watching anime, and then Studio Ghibli,
Whatever you want to call it.
whatever the correct pronunciation is. That got me into watching a lot more of those, and at this point I've seen. I think I've seen every single Studio Ghibli movie, and that got me watching other Japanese animated films, and so now I've seen dozens of Japanese animation. But yeah, so it is one of my favorite genres. I think the art is special, in a lot of these movies. What about you, Josh? What is your experience?
Well, I'm looking at the backlog. I actually have seen Pokemon the first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back, which is very confusingly titled.
Hell yes.
It's very confusingly titled because it says in the title it's the first movie, but also that a character is striking back. So
Well, he was striking back from something that
Yeah.
happened in the TV show, but whatever.
I'm aware because I watched the TV show.
It's weird.
Yeah, I definitely saw this in theaters. I guess I must have been 8 years old because I loved the Pokemon TV show. But I never branched out from there. I mean, I think I only liked it because number one, it was immensely popular at the end of the '90s, and two, I played the Game Boy games and traded the cards, so it was like a whole media empire that I was taking part in. But only for like a year or two max. Then I don't know, got involved with those. I don't really know why I stopped watching Pokemon. I don't know. I guess the attention of a 10-year-old is
It was just one of those things.
Short,
in my
so,
recollection, it was just one day. Either everyone stopped watching Pokemon except for like 5% of people who had been watching Pokemon.
And I think that's a similar phenomenon to what happened to Pokemon Go now 5
Yes.
years ago. Like I played Pokemon Go in 2016. Everyone and their mother played Pokemon Go in 2016, and some people still are playing Pokemon Go. Graze, you're pointing at yourself. I stopped playing in 2016, but a small percent of the population are still doing it and loving it, and good for you. I'm happy for you because it was really fun when I did it, but it's stopped for some reason. I
Doesn't
don't
stick
really know
with
why.
people. It happens. But yeah, so you've seen a couple of the childhood anime things.
Yeah. Okay. So I saw the first Pokemon in theaters. Just within the last year, I saw a couple of Miyazaki movies. I saw My Neighbor Totoro and Spirited Away. Both like since the pandemic started. So, I liked both of them. I don't know if it's like my, the fact that I'm not used to the anime style that kind of was like a bit of, bit of a separation between me and the Miyazaki movies, but I didn't like have the experience that a lot of people seem to, which is, the transcendental kind of thing, like a transcendent experience. I didn't have that, but I'm gonna watch more Miyazaki movies. I'll probably revisit Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro at some point, but I thought they were good. But I don't know, nothing like. Maybe I just don't get it.
I do think
yet.
Grab you and blow you away.
I do think that anime as a genre is one of those. It's one of those things that just gets overhyped. When anime fans will hype the crap out of something, so then if you're not like a diehard anime fan and you don't know what you're getting into when you go to watch one of these movies, it is very possible that you'll be like, oh, okay, that was good, but I don't feel like my life has changed.
Like, what is it?
I mean, I'm passionate about movies and storytelling and stories. So like I thought that it's something that's universally beloved, or maybe not quite universally beloved, but something that a lot of people feel very strongly about it. I feel like I would get what it is they're responding to, and I think I do. I just am not responding to it as strongly as some people are, I guess. I'm still responding to it. Like I still thought Spirited Away was really good. It's just that Spirited Away is atop many lists of like best movies of the last 20 years, and I didn't find it to be that exactly upon first viewing. But one of the things you have on the outline here is like, what do you
what do you like?
What do we like about anime films?
Yeah.
What don't we like? One thing that I kind of struggled with watching these two movies this week is that they're very visually dense, and because I'm not only reading subtitles for the lines, they're also at times subtitling like text you see on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like there's a lot of text on screen just
There
all
is.
the time.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's like a lot of details like in the background, like again the frame is very full. Whether you're painting across someone's room and they just have like a lot of trinkets in their room and that kind of stuff, like it's a lot to take in. So perhaps upon just one viewing with Spirited Away is not enough, and I needed to see it a few more times to really take in what it's doing. But I guess that's like a. Go ahead. Sorry.
So that is like with the question, what do we like, what don't we like? One of the things that I think most people like about anime, for those who really do like anime films, is the art. Like you mentioned, backgrounds are frequently much more detailed in Japanese animation than they are in Western animation.
Totally
And
agree. Yeah.
Part of that is the simplicity that like especially with older Disney movies, they paint the background and then they have a slide essentially of whatever they're animating that moves in front of the background. So they're not changing the background from one frame to the next quite as frequently because that's how they made the movies. Japanese animation, especially like we mentioned Akira, one of the things that it's most famous for was the way they did their backgrounds. They did multiple layers of to give their backgrounds depth. So they were giving like 3D effect, and the way you move through scenes in Akira, and this carried through lots of Japanese animation since then, was done that with those extra layers of depth, which was really hard to do before they started doing computer animation, because they had to draw all of those things in the slightly differing viewpoints as people transition through the scenes, so that you would get that depth of vision. So yeah, the backgrounds are way more detailed. I think that's really cool, but that is also one of the reasons that I typically watch things dubbed, because it is a lot harder, especially on a first watch, to fully appreciate all the artwork while you're also having to read the text at the bottom of the screen. So that's one of the, and I have it on here, one of the questions is dubs versus subs. Among anime fans, most people prefer subs. It's the way the artists originally intended their movie to be experienced in their native language and all that. So I fully respect subs, but I also want to respect their art, which is why I usually watch dubs.
I think that I would never watch a dubbed movie that was live action just because the non-matching of mouth and words is distracting, but you kind of lose a little bit of that in animation, like particularly this style of animation, like the mouth and sound don't really match up anyway, or not as much as you would with live action,
Not too much,
or more detailed animation style. So I think that dubbing is less of an issue with this kind of thing. And I actually, I understand that, you know, the artist intended it to be said in Japanese or whatever language it was made in, but there is some stuff that can get lost in translation with subtitling. Like, you know, particularly like in, you know, from whatever language to English, like the syntax is different, so like words are in a different order, and like so like what word a character is emphasizing, for example, could get lost in translation. But if you have a dubbed version, like the English language actor will read it the way it's supposed to, you know, the way you're supposed to understand it, you know.
Theoretically, they will.
yeah, exactly. Theoretically, I mean, I guess as long as the filmmakers are involved in the dubbing process, I don't know how
And that's
common
the
that
biggest
is,
issue
but...
is that until recently, the original filmmakers were rarely involved with dubbing. That's become more common where they deals are made for the new Japanese films. You know, when they're being dubbed by companies like Funimation here in the U.S., they are much more focused on actually, like you said, hitting the correct emphasis on words, coming up with better translations, because it does frequently happen that, you know, we just don't have a word for the word that they are using. You know, we have similar words, but anyone will tell you that they don't mean exactly the same thing, so they have to get as close as they can. So, but yeah, you're right.
And I think the moment sorry to interrupt, I think the moment that it started changing was when Miyazaki sort of became a big international name, and he started being upset at the quality of the dubbing, and he was like, oh, dubbing, I want to be involved in the dubbing process. I want it to be good for an international audience to, you know, be able to have a version of the film that reflects my artistic vision, even in another language. And I think that was kind of one of the stepping
turning
stones
point for
that
sure.
eventually led to better dubbing overall. You know?
Didn't he like cast the English actors for the dubbing of Spirited Away? I think I remember reading that.
I honestly don't know about that.
It's I'm not sure if he did the casting, but I know there was sort of a disagreement between him and Disney, which was distributing some of the Ghibli movies at the time, that the dubbing wasn't up to par according to him, and so he didn't want the movies to be distributed, or some of the movies were distributed by Disney, but the dubbing wasn't great, and he went publicly said, oh, the version in English is not very good because the dubbing is bad.
And then
something to that extent.
And then they did make changes
and then
to start
from
making
then
better
on,
dubs.
Exactly. Yeah.
I definitely have read articles with that that storyline a few times.
Actually, now that I think about it, I think I watched like the first half of My Neighbor Totoro subtitled, and I watched the second half dubbed. And I think I actually did prefer dubbing because like I said, ordinarily if I was watching a movie that wasn't in English, I would never ever think to watch a dubbed version. I would only ever watch subtitles. But like as I was watching an anime, I was like, you know what, it actually is a little easier and it doesn't bother me as much that their mouths aren't matching because they weren't really matching anyway. So I think I got more out of it dubbing than subbing.
And especially with the more recent dubs, it's becoming safer and safer to watch dubbed movies in terms of getting the actual, you know, quality that you would have gotten from the subs. So before we move on, I did want to just touch briefly on anime versus Western animation, just because as I said, I'm a huge animation fan. Some of the big differences that I notice watching a lot of, you know, American animated films and Japanese animated films, some of the big differences are the way emotions are shown on characters. In Japanese animation, you'll see much bigger emotions, like they will literally, you know, like change the size of someone's face or their mouth or their eyes to like greater emphasize whatever emotion they're trying to get for you. Whereas more typically in
lots of screaming as well.
Yeah, lots of screaming. In Western animation, the way they show emotions, they try to aim for more lifelike representation of those emotions in a lot of cases.
Especially in the 3D era.
Josh is smiling. What's the smirk about?
Because I completely get what you're saying, but I'm also like thinking about the older Western animation where like a character's tongue would fall out of their mouth and their eyes would bug out and like they would go "Awooga" and that kind of stuff.
Fair.
That's a little outdated though. That's
right.
Decades ago. You don't see that in modern animation in the West.
Well, and I was more thinking of like the Disney animated.
I know.
Like, going back to like Snow White, you know, and Cinderella and all that. They, you know, they go for actual human emotions on their faces.
No,
But you're right.
I get it.
Looney Tunes
but I'm also
was
thinking,
Looney
I'm also
Tunes.
thinking, yeah, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Looney Tunes and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, that's a good point. So there are
varying degrees. Yeah,
varying degrees. Another one of the things that I've noticed through Japanese animation is they use a lot of tropes that carry on from one Japanese animated film or movie or or TV show to the next. You'll see a lot of things that like shonen is a genre of anime, and it is a genre
which means for young people.
yeah, but it's
Right.
they share common themes throughout the whole shonen category, which are all tropes. The hero that didn't know he was going to be the hero that
Yeah.
keep,
And has a secret power.
has a secret
inside
power,
him
yeah.
that you didn't know about. Yeah.
and then they beat the first villain, and then the next villain shows up, and then they have to be stronger, and it's
Yeah.
I mean,
they go through training and do a tournament and all that.
there's
stuff. Yeah.
fan service, which is hyper sexualized stuff in animation. That's a whole other trope that you see a lot more with Japanese animation. It's not to say that we don't sexualize like comic book characters and stuff like that in the U.S., but I think there's more consistency with these tropes in Japanese animation. The other thing I wanted to say was content of films. Animation in Japan has never been entirely for children.
No.
Whereas animation, for whatever reason, when it became popular in the United States, it was almost exclusively used to make kids' movies. So I don't know what the origin of that is, but for whatever reason, like we can see, in 1997, Perfect Blue came out, and that is not a movie for kids, not even close.
No. That's one of the things that I think is the most distinct. I think I'll say the majority of Western animation, even when it has more complex themes, is generally accessible to children in a way that anime isn't necessarily. Like anime has distinct genres and age groups that it aims for, depending on what they're trying to do with the film. Like it's very unusual for a Western animated movie to be a film for adults that specifically is not for children.
Right.
It might have adult themes that children won't necessarily be able to pick up on, but usually it includes children in its
Demographics.
audience.
Yeah.
and every time, in the rare cases that there are animated movies in the West that are made exclusively for adults, every time that happens, you will get confused parents taking their kids to see it, thinking
Yes.
that it'll be for kids, and like you'll get moms horrified at what Sausage Party is.
I knew you were going to use that example.
I mean, that's like a very prominent example. It's
Yeah.
a very high-profile, adult-only animated movie from the last 5 years. So,
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Okay, so that's our general discussion, unless anybody else has anything they want to add real quick.
I wanted to say something that kind of will lead into the film to remembers. So that's okay. But you said, what's the difference between anime and Western animation? I see what you're saying, the fact that anime has tropes, but I also think that because a lot of the Western animation is directed at kids, it may not have the same kind of tropes that anime has, but it does have a more standard, recognizable structure to it.
Okay.
That the anime movies I watched, so I guess I've now seen 4 anime movies, 2 Ghibli's and the 2 Film to Remembers this week. All 4 of those, are not, if you watch a Disney movie, for example, because it's for kids, it is like a very simple, hero's journey where you open with a character that wants something that's clearly missing from their life. Something happens to them about 10 minutes in that, sets them on a course to, and then there's a very clear act breaks. I'm obsessed with act breaks, and you can define them very, very easily in, Western animated movies, which I like. It makes it easy for me to wrap my head around the movie, and it makes it easy for kids to wrap their heads around the movie, because most of these are directed at kids. And the 4 anime movies I've seen are maybe a little more frustrating in how they're structured, and it's not particularly Perfect Blue. That's a intentionally frustrating movie in terms of what's happening when and that kind of stuff. And My Neighbor Totoro is paced in such a way that's really not trying to entertain you every second. There's a lot of empty space in My Neighbor Totoro by design, And Spirited Away has the opposite problem, where it's just kind of throwing a million things at you at once, and it's hard to get a grasp of like what this story is even about exactly. And you don't really have that problem with Western animation, I guess.
That's true.
It's
No,
more
you're
towards kids.
absolutely right, and that's you'll as you watch more Studio Ghibli movies, you'll see that there are a lot of those movies have almost no third act, like they just kind of
Yeah.
end.
Yes.
And then other movies, also like you said, are their slice of life. You're getting a look into their life, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is paced at in a particular way to drive at a particular moment.
Yeah, it's just different
Yeah,
than
it's also-
than Western animation.
100%.
It's also kind of a Japanese storytelling thing. That
Yeah,
story
yeah.
isn't quite as well structured as Western story. There is a thing about Japanese storytelling that is a bit more convoluted and a little more complicated to understand on a first read or watch or whatever it is, or play when it comes to video games. That Western stories seem to generally stick to a more structured approach, so it's kind of easier to follow.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, in the case of anime versus Western animation, it also does mean that anime is able to tackle some complex themes and interesting means of storytelling that maybe Western animation doesn't even try to go for. So I think there's goods and bad.
Yeah,
there's good and bad because of this.
Yeah, which is why I think it's if you're a fan of Western animation, I would strongly suggest broadening your horizon to take in some anime, even if you haven't done that, because you do get some very different stories that are in a lot of cases as good or better than a lot of the Western animated stories. Okay, well, so let's dive into our first film to remember, which is Makoto Shinkai's Your Name from 2016. I'm going to put up a screenshot there. There we go. This was written and directed by Makoto Shinkai. It's based on a light novel that he had written. Light novels in Japan have text along with imagery, more so than
Right.
any like a young adult novel would have that in the U.S. It was not nominated for Best Animated Feature, which I think is worth bringing up because it is already widely considered one of the best animated movies of all time. And in fact, on a lot of on IMDb and Letterboxd, Your Name is on their top lists as well, so it's very popular among users as well.
Yeah.
But the year that it came out, it was the nominees that year for Best Animated Film were The Red Turtle, which I have not heard of.
I mentioned that last week on the podcast.
Ghibli distributed.
My Life as a Courgette.
Yep.
Is that My Life as a Zucchini with a different title?
Oh,
Yes,
that's what
it
that
is.
is.
Okay.
I was like, I've heard of My Life as a Zucchini, so apparently the Courgette is the original title.
It's courgette.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes
because it's a
sense.
It's
French,
French.
film.
Okay, that
so
makes sense.
It's
So then, yes, I have heard of that
Courgette
one.
is the French.
Moana, Kubo and the Two Strings, and Zootopia, which won Best Animated Feature. So, like I said, I haven't seen The Red Turtle, and I haven't seen My Life as a Zucchini, but I know that it is, again, very well liked. So
Well received. Yeah.
that year was stellar in animated movies. Kubo and the Two Strings and Moana are two of my favorite animated movies. So, great year.
Great.
So even though Your Name is one of my all-time favorites, I'm not really that mad that it didn't get a nomination.
Fair enough.
Have you guys seen any of those other?
I think I've only
films?
seen Zootopia. I've somehow missed Moana. Somehow I missed Kubo and the Two Strings because I know that's like one of the best movies of that year, apparently.
Yeah, so
from
good.
what I hear. But
Yeah, apparently really good.
I've only seen Zootopia of those five.
Also a very good movie, but Zootopia is
Excellent.
Is it's kind of weird to me in that it's a Disney movie, but it's
Yeah.
less Disney than you usually get from a Disney movie, if you can grasp what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Your Name, back on that one, is the first anime film that was not made by Studio Ghibli or Hayao Miyazaki to gross 10 billion yen, which is huge.
Can you give me a sense of the what's 10 billion yen in
I mean, I'll
the
do that real quick.
exchange
10
rate?
billion.
Yeah.
Keep going.
USD.
I'm going to look it up.
It is $93,813,000.
Okay, so near the $100 million threshold is the closest. Yeah, okay.
which is quite a lot.
It is
for a
sure.
single country as small as Japan.
Yeah.
It's pretty huge.
The next thing I wanted to mention was, as a fun fact, in the film, one of the main characters, Taki, works at a restaurant, and it features a name in Italian that Hugo is going to read for me.
The name is Il Giardino delle Parole,
Yeah.
which means the Garden of Words.
And the reason I wanted Hugo to do it is because I was curious how accurate that translation is.
It's good, and I famously have a qualm with a lot of Italian in films because sometimes it's just kind of obnoxiously not accurate. But in this film, it really was, and even the Italian food looked surprisingly good and right.
And
So,
right.
yeah, I was very very impressed by the Italian representation in your name.
The reason that is a fun fact, besides it being in Italian for Hugo, is that the Garden of Words was the previous film that Makoto Shinkai had made before Your Name. So that's that's a really cool Easter egg, at least in my opinion.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Another fun fact I wanted to mention was that the songs and scores were all written and performed by a Japanese band called Radwimps. And the reason one of the reasons I love this movie so much is because they even wrote all new English language covers of the songs that they wrote originally for the movie, for the English dubbed version of the film. And while writing the music originally and for the dub, they worked with Makoto Shinkai to make sure that they were writing lyrics that were complementary to what was actually happening on screen.
Cool.
Which I think really comes through in the movie. What do you guys think about the music?
I liked it a lot. Yeah, and it was kind of, I guess, I watched this second, and I watched Perfect Blue before this, subtitled, and then I turned this on and I watched the dub version, and just so in the opening credits here, English language singing, kind of calmed me a little bit.
Surprised
It's
you.
I was I was kind of tired a little bit of reading so much, but then
Japanese.
hearing someone singing in English, I'm like, oh wow, that's really nice. It's also really good music, and it really sets the tone, and it's good.
Well, and what was so cool about the music here is I was surprised when I found out that they not only wrote all the songs with lyrics, but they also wrote the score, because all the piano bits and all that are very different musically from the songs with lyrics.
But they do feel like they are all contributing to a mood that the film wants to put you in, and I think the score and the songs are all fantastic. They're just lovely. They're just like the movie. It puts you in a good mood, and it fits with what the movie is trying to say.
Makoto,
I don't know about the English version because I watched it subtitled, so I don't know. I didn't know that they had written and performed the English versions, which is fun, which is a really cool detail that they did.
Well,
so
it's something I hope
the dubbed version is probably really good.
It's something I hope that we'll see more of.
They cared a lot about it.
It's something I hope they'll see more of in dubbed versions, because I do think that it adds, if you're going to dub it, changing the music as well just makes it a more complete,
cohesive,
story in the English version, which is really cool. Radwimps Makoto Shinkai loved working with them so much that he brought them back to do the music for his next film, Weathering with You, which came out last year, 2 years ago, something like that.
I think it was 2019.
2019, so 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So if you liked the music in this movie, you'll probably like the music in Weathering with You as well. All right, well let's get into some general thoughts on the movie.
Josh, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'd like to start with Josh.
Since you're the one being introduced to anime, it's very interesting to see what your thoughts would be on this.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really sweet. I thought the central relationship, which kind of carries the movie, it worked really well. I don't want to get into too much detail about the central relationship because that's kind of, get into some spoiler territory. I thought that it was interesting. It's an interesting conceit. The premise of the movie is that these two characters, this girl in a rural part of Japan and this boy in Tokyo, a more metropolitan part of Japan. They wake up in each other's bodies frequently, and at first they think they're just dreaming, but then they realize, oh wait, we actually are switching bodies a day at a time. I think that's like an interesting conceit, and but what the movie does with that conceit is really interesting, and I'll save what that is, but yeah, I thought it was very charming, and yeah, it worked for me, I think.
What about you, Hugo? This was your first time seeing this one as well, right?
It was surprisingly, because I've been looking up well-regarded anime to watch, and for some reason I hadn't seen this one yet, and yeah, I loved it. I thought it's fantastic. The central relationship is absolutely lovely. The art is just beautiful. Like I haven't seen a sky that beautiful in real life.
Yeah.
The music was fantastic. I really like the central relationship, and it's really, yeah, as Josh said, a really sweet, charming, warm film that, despite some, complex, there are things that happen in the film that can be really depressing and sad, but the film overall manages to just put you it kind of sweeps you away and puts you in a good mood.
Yeah, it's a feel good in the
lovely.
end.
Yeah.
I know we talked about it briefly in our chats, but since I want to talk about the artwork in this film, the food in this movie looks so good. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I was watching this film with my girlfriend, and we have a group chat to program the podcast and all that, and I was like, guys, I'm watching this, and it's 11 p.m. over here, and I'm so hungry. I want ramen right now, because all of the food just looks so beautiful and delicious, and it was amazing.
But yeah, so for me, my general thoughts, the artwork is absolutely breathtaking in parts. In fact, I love the artwork so much in this movie that I actually purchased film cells of your name, just from the film reel, to get just so I could have a piece of this movie that have these brilliant I was very fortunate I was able to get one of the scenes with the meteor, the comet in there, which is I think is the most visually striking part of the movie.
For sure.
So I mean it's of all the animated films I've ever watched, I honestly believe this is the most beautiful in terms of the actual artwork, which is saying something, because there's a lot of really pretty animated movies out there.
Yeah, I put this on the outline, but I think what's so good about the art is that it feels like it's a magical world, even though there are some fantasy elements to it, but it is set in the real world for all intents and purposes, and it makes it look so fantastical and sort of magical. So yeah, the art is incredible. I loved it. Yeah,
and then of course
a lot of good. The before we move on from the art, just some of the images of landscape and craters. Not to talk too much about the second half of the movie, but just the images of two people standing on opposite ends of a giant crater was really impactful. And I'm just thinking about this for the first time. There's a lot of shots, transitional shots of a door opening and closing, where you're the camera's in the door frame, and it's a sliding door that moves towards you. And they keep doing that a lot, both with Mitsuha. What's it? Mitsuha. Her house has those sliding doors, so you see a lot of that single shot where the door comes towards you as it closes. You see a lot of that in her house. You also see a lot on a train, the subway door closing, moving towards you. And I'm just thinking about how that splits the frame in half as it does that, which is an interesting thing about two characters on both sides of the crater. There is a lot of shots of two characters on both sides of the frame, and the doors kind of
separate them,
putting a barrier between them. Yeah, that's
very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that makes this movie so great, even among anime films, is that they do a lot of they take a lot from live action filmmaking that they work into this animation. So they'll do for one thing that jumps to mind for me is lens flare and stuff like that. Yeah. That you get with real cameras. They include that in a lot of the animation here, and particularly in the scenes where they're on the crater, and lighting becomes such a very important part of the movie. It's set up early on that magic hour is a focus, and so man, they do such like real life style lighting throughout the whole movie.
Yeah. Well, real quick, some of the opening. You talk about like beautiful shots in this. Like the opening is like a prologue of sorts. Like the opening of the movie is like the music plays over it, like I mentioned earlier, and it just kind of shows you like the shots are jumping out at me is like kind of from below the main characters, sweeping around them as you see the comet above them, and it's gorgeous. It's really good looking, and you kind of see the entire story kind of play out. And images that don't necessarily make sense to you, not having seen the movie yet, but like, I wasn't really sure what to make of that opening. I liked it because the music was really nice and it was nice to look at, but I didn't really understand what I was looking at. But it's not until the movie happens you're like, oh wait, you just kind of showed me everything. In those first
they gave you those little hints right at the beginning, which is an interesting thing because like if you watch anime TV shows these days, they still do intros at the top of their show, just like how American shows used to have, the intro song and people turning to look at the camera, all that stuff. Like somewhere along the way in U.S. television, we decided we weren't going to do intros for shows anymore. I guess just to get right to the story. That's fine, but they still do intros in Japanese animated television shows, and they don't always in movies, but they did in this one, and so I thought that was. Like kind of an interesting thing, to see that whole montage at the beginning of the movie, because it's basically like introducing a television show.
Yeah, but like I said though, like it worked for me just because like it was really pretty to look at, some really stunning artwork, and also good music. So I was in.
It really set the mood for what the movie was going to be, because otherwise I think the begin like that sort of little montage at the beginning gives you a mood that the beginning of the film wouldn't necessarily give you. Like the beginning of the film kind of starts out and you're unsure of what exactly the movie is or what's happening or whatever. So the first like 20 minutes, it's, well, I'll say confusing, but not in a bad way. Like it's supposed to be confusing because it's confusing for the protagonist as well.
Disorienting, yeah.
And so, but that intro kind of serves the purpose of giving you an idea of what you're going to feel throughout the film. So I think it's really, really smart.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I hadn't considered that, but you're right. You kind of do need that as like a tonal cue. Before we get into like what this movie actually is, once it reveals itself, in the first like half hour, I kind of thought this was going to be like a transgender allegory of sorts. Because it is a girl waking up in a boy's body and a boy waking up in a girl's body. And at one point, the girl does yell, in my next life, I want to be handsome boy from Tokyo, or right on the exact line, but like that is, that puts some kind of expectation and idea in my head of like what this movie is going to be, and it's not really that, it's something else. But I think the prologue that I'm calling it a prologue. I think that does help you kind of cue you to what sort of emotions they're going to be going for and what sort of maybe it's too much to say that they tell the theme in that opening 2 minutes, but it does give you a cue that like these people are connected in a way that so look for that as you watch.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do we want to go ahead and put the spoiler warning up now? Because we're gonna get into the characters here a little bit. So yeah, spoilers going forward here. I did want to get thoughts on the characters, and I love Hugo's note. Hugo, what'd you say here at the start here about the characters?
Yeah, so I just want to hug them all. Like they're all so nice. All of like the two main characters are both like very charming, and they're kind of both a bit like, well, he's kind of a clumsy guy who's really nice, but also doesn't know how to relate to women so much because he hasn't had experience, and she's like at the same time a very precise, orderly person because of her upbringing, but at the same time she also wants to have nothing to do with the place that she lives in and wants to move away to Tokyo. And all of their friends are just lovely, and they follow them on this crazy journey and believe them when they say this insane stuff that you wouldn't believe from anyone.
Very accommodating friends.
Yeah. They're the kind of friends that you all wish you had.
Yeah.
They're so
yes,
understanding.
absolutely. But like, regardless of just the story, they're just all so nice, and I love the dad character. His dad, not her dad. Her dad is the only kind of not villain in the film, but kind of an antagonist of sorts within the story, and everybody else is just so lovely all the time, and yeah, it's just lovely to see these nice people interacting.
Yeah, so
Yeah, those are my thoughts on the character.
I completely agree. They're all very, very likable characters, and I think that's another thing that feeds into the whole tone of the movie being overall lighthearted, even with the conflict that these characters find themselves in. Because all the characters are so positive, you don't become overly stressed about any of these weird situations because they seem to be surrounded by good people that are going to help them.
Yeah.
With their struggles, no matter, even if they're not fully aware of what those struggles are. But so Taki and Mitsuha, they're swapping bodies regularly and living each other's lives.
And leaving each other notes.
Leaving each other notes on their phones or writing on their faces to call them names and stuff. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
Is there a reaction to any of this stuff? Do you think it's believable at all, or is it like just something you accept because it's the premise of the movie?
Well, I think within the fantastical story that they're telling, that is kind of what would happen, because you wouldn't right away tell everybody because you would be scared that they wouldn't believe you or think you're crazy.
Yeah.
And I guess you would start writing on your phone, and then trying to communicate with this other person. And the only thing that I didn't find 100% believable is that they wouldn't exchange numbers and actually call each other before they call each other, and we get the like twist of the film.
Yeah.
But it's a little convenient for the story, but I don't think that's that big a deal.
I think it helps that we see them in their own bodies before we really see them not in their own bodies. So the first time we hear about it is it's Taki as Taki hearing from his friends, hey, you were really weird yesterday, and Mitsuha hearing from Mitsuha's friends saying the same thing, like, hey, you acted very strangely yesterday. But we don't actually see them act strange. We see them hear about the fact that they acted strange. I think that might help a little bit. Like, it kind of just lets you use your imagination of like how weird this was for them, and it doesn't actually have to show you how weird it actually was.
That's a good point. Because they at least from the way the friends describe it, the way that they were acting was weird, but not so weird.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if I woke up in a body I didn't recognize, in a place I didn't recognize, I would be very withdrawn and quiet and just try to get through that day.
Yeah.
Don't
let anybody know.
I'm sure people would say I was acting weirdly, but hopefully I wouldn't do anything outrageous that would be, crazy.
You would just kind of try to blend in.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so, because one of the questions I wanted to ask is it believable that their friends just kind of chalked their erratic behavior up to just being weird? Because, like, there's days where the characters forget where they're going. They're like, where do I work?
Yeah. I mean, that is very odd.
I suppose the first
True.
I suppose
maybe the first time it's like, oh, you're having a weird day or whatever, you're going through something, and I won't. Well, maybe if it happens, a few days in a row, then you're like, oh, what's going on with this person? But then if it happens once and then it doesn't happen again for a week, you're like, oh, maybe you'll just forget about it.
And they kind of pick up on those things. The friends pick up on like there's something weird going here, but I don't hate who you are on these days that you're doing the weird things. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Same with Mitsuha's sister.
Yeah.
She'll come in her and I also thought it was really funny that whenever they wake up in each other's bodies, when Taki wakes up as Mitsuha, he feels her boobs with curiosity, and when Mitsuha wakes up in Taki's body, she feels his crotch with curiosity. Not necessarily in like a sexual way, just like in like, oh hey, that's new kind of way.
When Mitsuha as Taki first realizes that she has to go to the bathroom, that moment she's like, oh no, I have to pee.
Yeah, that was great. And also, that was one thing that surprised me of the film, because I kind of, when I first saw the scene of her, him in her body touching the boobs and realizing, oh, I'm a girl, I initially thought, oh, okay, we're getting into the anime thing and it's going to be weird and overly sexualized and annoying. But it kind of ends up being kind of realistic. And they're both sort of respectful to each other.
Eventually.
Even though they do that. Yeah, but it's kind of like, it's not as sexualized and awkward and weird as some other anime can get.
Yes, for sure.
That kind of
I think
puts you in an
they stopped
uncomfortable mood.
at a point where it's like, yes, this is
Yeah.
a teenager. These teenagers have swapped bodies, so there is going to be some
Yeah.
curiosity, but they're not. It's not to the level of creepiness.
Yeah, let's not address it too much. Yeah, that was I think it was a good decision.
But yeah,
But yeah,
so
it was pretty funny.
I did want to ask: do you have friends in your lives that would believe you if you ended up having to tell them the stuff that these people were going through? I don't think so.
I look, you'd have to give some pretty solid proof of this, and I think the movie does a decent job because the thing is that it goes on. Well, we only see the beginning, and then there's sort of a montage of different scenes at different moments in their lives as this is happening to them, and it's kind of assumed that it goes on for a few months. So, like, they build up a series of different like proofs that they can tell their friends about, and their friends would kind of believe them. But again, it's another sort of conceit of the film, but I don't think it hurts the themes or what the film is going for. And I kind of, with anime, a lot of the time when the story isn't like 100% logical, I kind of brush it aside. It's not something
You can
that I
accept it
focus
a
on
little
too
more
much.
easily.
Yeah, with animation in general, I don't know why. It's just something that happens when I watch stuff.
There's absolutely zero way that anyone would. I would be able to pull this off like they do. Like, I would be found out immediately if that would happen. But like, the important thing is not whether or not I could see this happening in my own life. It's whether or not I buy it in the world of the movie, and I do.
And
I
I
definitely
do
buy it.
in the world that they set up here. So let's get into it, like a really more spoilery kind of question.
We put up the spoiler tag a little too early, I think, because we just went another like 10 minutes in not spoiler territory.
My bad.
That's okay. No, it's all our fault.
When did you first realize that they were not at the same point in the timeline?
I didn't. I like the phone call. I was like, what's happening? And until the film surprised me. I did realize there was something weird going on with the red ribbon. Because I was like, this or string or what? It's not a ribbon. It's a piece of string. Why he seems to have the same string that she has? Have they met?
Yeah.
Because I was like, did they meet before and they didn't show it? But why would they do that? Because if they did meet, that would be significant. So they would show it. So I did realize there was something else going on besides what was going on. But it really surprised me with the twist that, spoilers, her whole town had been destroyed by this comet that had, broken off and landed on Japan.
Sounds like
did surprise me.
Sounds like I got to it just right before Hugo did, which is, so about 45 minutes in, Taki tries to call Mitsuha, and it doesn't work. Her number's been disconnected. And like right around that same time, like right before that happens, he looks at his phone and, she has left him notes, and she references the comet. And he doesn't know what she's talking about. Yeah. And that's the point that I realized two different things were happening, just because like in Mitsuha's timeline, like the news has mentioned the comet multiple times. Like everyone's talking about the comet. It was shown to us twice, the audience twice. So it's a big deal. And then the fact that he doesn't know what she's talking about means, okay, they're not living in the same world right now.
I'm with Josh. That was the moment where I first realized there was something up, that they weren't getting the same experiences.
Maybe 3 minutes later, the phone call doesn't connect. So like you get those moments very
close together,
on top of each other quickly.
One thing that I learned, having watched the film again and having seen people talk about it online, they actually reveal that they are at different points in the timeline very early on. When they start making notes in the phones, the dates don't match up. So like they don't match up to the same day of the week. So in the calendar, what is a Wednesday for Taki is a Friday for Mitsuha or whatever it was. So like that's very subtle, and like especially if you're watching, since I don't speak Japanese and I don't read Japanese, that's not something that an American audience would ever be able to pick up on, because everything is written in Japanese on their phones.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really cool.
Like, it's very quick shots of their phones as they're like scrolling through the calendar days. It says September 12th, September 13th, and like sometimes it moves forward, sometimes it moves backward, and like honestly that was like such a fast paced sequence. I couldn't exactly actually tell, like, are they marking which days they switched, which days they didn't switch, and I don't know. That was just like there's a lot being thrown at us at that time, so I definitely was not able to pick that up.
I think the idea was that on the day that they switched, the other person would write down everything that they did and what was going to happen the next day if they had set up anything in the other's life that they had to go through.
So that they could play it off.
Like the date, the date night is one of the big examples of this. And yeah, that was kind of the idea, I think.
So I was going to ask, do you think this story would have been better if Taki and Mitsuha at the end of the movie aren't ever able to actually reconnect?
Absolutely not. No.
I agree.
No.
There was a big push online, and there was rumors that that Makoto Shinkai's original ending for it was that they never actually meet back up.
Met again.
And never met again in Tokyo in the future. He has vehemently denied that rumor and tweeted pictures like, here's my original screenplay. You can see it ends exactly like it does in the movie. But I did think it was an interesting question because I'm one of those people that frequently enjoys a movie that has a very ends tragically. That's my dog.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. If you can hear Mando going off in the background, my apologies.
That's all right.
Yeah, so like if it had ended that way, I think there would be some sort of beautiful poetry to them having had this connection and having found a way to save Mitsuha's life, only to never actually be together. So I can see why people would like that, but I love the way it ends. So
I actually don't see how people could like that. That feels like a betrayal of the narrative promise of the movie. If they don't meet at the end, that would leave me wondering, well, what was the point of all that? And I guess, the point is that you saved hundreds of people in this town, but also, like, we're not watching.
Isn't really about.
But the
that.
movie.
We're not watching
entirely
this movie. We're not watching this movie to see whether 500 tons people survive this. We're watching this movie about two people and the connection they have. So to deny us that connection in the end would make me say, well, what was the point of this? And that's not. And I can't believe anyone would ever want that for them to not meet. That's a really dumb thing to me. I apologize to anybody who thinks that, but that's you're wrong and that's dumb.
Well, and I'm so glad that the movie ends the way that it does, just because like they pass each other on the street and on the trains and like they have several misconnections before they finally lock eyes again, separated by two trains going opposite directions.
Yep.
And then they get off and they run, from their respective train stations, and then they try to play it off like they're not frantically searching for the love of their lives. They meet at the staircase and they're like, okay, be cool.
Have we met? Because the idea is that they lose their memories there. But yeah, I completely agree. I wrote this on the outline as well. But the film is about human connection. Regardless of what the plot is and of the actual plot, just metaphoric. The central metaphor of the film is two people are connected and somehow they're going to find each other. And so if they don't at the end, it would kind of feel cheap. I would be really dissatisfied. And I wrote in the outline, this ain't La La Land, because that film kind of has a similar idea to it, but it does end with the two characters not connecting at the end. But I feel like the reason is because that film is about people pursuing their dreams, and this film is about specifically the connection. So I don't think that ending would have fit in this film.
In La La Land, they're together for most of that movie, and then they decide to not be together at the end. Like Mitsuha and Taki are not together for this whole movie, and it's not until the very, very end that we actually get to see them together. So very, very different things. And again, it wouldn't make any sense for them to. You're right, Hugo. This is not La La Land. It would not make sense for this movie.
I'm glad we all agree on that, because I think that the ending is so feel good of this movie that if it were anything else, it would not be the same. We are all in agreement on that, which I love. Because we do need to move on to Perfect Blue, because again, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I'm sorry that I'm talking so much about it.
No, it's great.
But the last thing I wanted to talk about with it is that there is a live action version of the movie being produced by J.J. Abrams, and was originally slated to be
God.
directed by Mark Webb, who did Amazing Spider-Man and 500 Days of Summer. Like if you only knew it was Amazing Spider-Man, you'd be like, why would they put this guy in charge? But 500 Days of Summer, okay.
500 Days of Summer is great, and he also directed several episodes of the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I was a very big fan of on the CW in the last few years. Great show, and he's a talented filmmaker.
But now, so I don't know how much work he did on it before he left the project, but now it is being directed by Lee Isaac Chung, who of course is very famous right now for having directed Minari. So what I wanted to ask is, what do we think about this being remade?
My answer to that is there already is a live action American version of this movie. It's called The Lake House, starring Keanu Reeves and Sandy Bullock from the mid 2000s. Not a very good movie. In fact, actually kind of bad, but it's basically the same premise in that Keanu Reeves and Sandy Bullock are like communicating over time and space via the mailbox of this lake house, and you find out like halfway through the movie that Keanu Reeves is dead, and Sandy Bullock has to figure out a way to prevent his death from the future. Doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make much sense, but it exists, and that's honestly the movie I thought of the most while watching Your Name.
That's a fair comparison. Because
It's
the talking
honestly,
to each other
it's
through time.
very, very similar. Yeah.
What do you think, Hugo?
Okay, if the news was J.J. Abrams is producing a movie directed by Lee Isaac Chung, and it's about two people exchanging bodies and finding a connection across time and space, I'd be like, cool, that sounds like it's going to be a good movie. The thing is, though, that because it's the adaptation of an animated film, anime or not, that I do think the track record for that kind of thing isn't
It's not great.
stellar. I'm not, this generally doesn't end up well. And I wish them the best, but I don't see this working. Because there's something about the art of the film that is a major part of why the film is great.
100%.
That I don't know how you translate to live action, aside from having a gigantic CGI budget, which would make it look weird. So I don't know exactly how you do that.
The artistry, especially like I said about the comet, is
Yeah.
it would lose some of its magic if it was done realistically.
Yes.
So I'm in addition to live action remakes having almost never been better than the original animated film. In fact, I'm having a hard
Almost never been good.
I'm having a hard time thinking
Well-
of any example in which I have felt that a live action remake was better than the original.
Yeah.
I don't think there is one. there have been live action remakes that I think are good movies. Like I enjoyed the Jungle Book remake, but it's not better than the original Jungle Book.
Sure, yeah. But
I enjoyed the Lion King one, but not as much as I enjoyed the original Lion King. So I don't think there's a point to it other than cashing in, which I don't love. And I think it's going to lose a lot of the magic, it being transitioned from animation to live action, and that's sad.
The Lake House already exists.
The Lake House already exists.
Yep,
Just go watch The Lake House, guys. Film to remember. The Lake House.
I'm not sure I'd recommend it. I have seen it. I'm not sure I recommend it. It's not as good as this.
Do you guys have any last thoughts on this one, so we can dive into Perfect Blue?
Nope.
Okay. Well, then let's...
No, I think we can go ahead.
So do you want to do both the Film to Remember rankings at the end, or do one now and
Yeah,
the
let's
other
just
at
do
the
it
end?
at the end. Let's
Okay.
Yeah, let's get into the movie.
Okay. Perfect Blue. I'm going to take off the spoiler
Try to
warning.
go quick on this, I guess. 'Cause...
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I just love this movie so much.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I mean, it's like me going off on Tarantino and Josh going off on Paul Thomas Anderson. So it's fair.
Just wait till we have our No Country for Old Men episode. It's coming someday.
yes.
Coming soon.
Hell,
Honestly, like
yes.
that episode might just be me talking through like every minute of the movie. So that might be a monologue.
We will need a
episode.
couple of minutes so that I can say why I don't love it, and then you guys can tear me apart about it.
I'm glad you know what
Fair.
the how that episode's gonna go. I'm glad you're aware of that
I
already.
know what I'm walking into. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so our next film to remember is Perfect Blue, which came out in 1997, directed by Satoshi Kon, who regrettably passed away in 2010 from pancreatic cancer. It's worth mentioning that he has passed away, in my opinion, because of his 10 director credits, 4 of them are in the Letterboxd 100 for top animation. So,
Yeah.
4 of his 10 movies
like,
are considered the best animated movies of all time by a huge swath of people.
And also,
that's impressive.
and also, yes, he has 10 credits, but as a director, those are the 4 feature-length animated movies that he made. So all of them are really highly regarded. So
yeah, and those 4 movies are, in case you're curious, are Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, Tokyo Godfathers, and Paprika.
Yes.
So
have you seen Paprika?
I haven't seen Millennium Actress or Paprika, but I have seen Tokyo Godfathers.
Go watch it,
and I highly recommend that. I watched it at Christmas time because it's a sort of Christmas film.
Movie. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And it's really cool. But yeah, Perfect Blue was originally going to be a live action series, but after an earthquake damaged the studio, the budget was reduced and the film was changed to an original video animation, which. Yeah. It's weird to me to think of one studio that was going to develop as a live action, and then they decide to switch it to animation.
It's just because the idea was we have a lower budget. How can we tell
the same story?
And the same story, but with a lower budget and a smaller runtime. And they were like, "Oh, live action we don't have enough money to make it, and we'll make it an animation." And I think you can tell that the animation on this isn't as high quality as it could be for 1997. It doesn't have as many frames of animation as some other works, either Japanese or Western, of the same period.
It's also shorter. This is only 80 minutes long, which is
very short movie. Yeah,
not a lot of money to work with.
of a limited budget. Yeah.
Could they have told the story as well in live action?
I was thinking about that as I was watching it, actually. I was thinking about, is there anything in this that is inherently, would require animation? And the only thing I can think of is there's a few shots of... this movie's about a pop star, a teen pop idol who becomes an actress. And she keeps having, delusions, I guess, of her pop idol self appear and speak to her and mock her and that kind of thing. And there's a shot where her pop idol, projection or delusion or whatever is hopping along street lights. Yeah, light posts. And that was one of the only shots that I clocked as something that they would have to get creative with if they did this live action. But other than that, I didn't see much.
There's one other thing that I think would not translate as well in live action, but that's a spoiler, so I'll talk about that.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually pretty crucial moment. Yeah,
it's a big moment. I don't think it could be captured the same way.
It would definitely be different, or they would have to. Well, I mean, they'd have to get kind of creative with what the camera is showing you versus what a character is seeing.
Yes, 100%.
You could kind of maybe do something like that.
There's a way it could be done. I just think it's a lot harder.
I think it probably did work better as an animated, that sequence, yeah.
Another last fact I wanted to bring up was that Darren Aronofsky owns the American rights for this film. He purchased
and why is that?
He purchased the rights so that he could remake the bath scene in his live-action film Requiem for a Dream.
That is so interesting. Because I saw that in the outline. I'm
Isn't
like, oh my God. Because I recognized it immediately. Once I read that, I'm like, yeah, that's exact. Jennifer Connelly in the bathtub in Requiem for a Dream does exactly what what's this character's name? Mima. Exactly what Mima does in the bathtub. Yeah. And yeah, it's so interesting that he has to buy the entire rights to the whole movie just to do one shot, an homage to one shot is crazy.
Well, and apparently Darren Aronofsky has credited Satoshi Kon as a major influence for him.
Definitely see it. Yeah, this definitely has an Aronofsky style and tone. Yeah,
for sure. And then especially when you realize that another fun fact about this movie, and it's not a fact so much as it is a point of discussion, people have noted there's a great number of parallels between Perfect Blue and Aronofsky's Black Swan. And Aronofsky has said that Black Swan was not inspired by Perfect Blue. But he did already own the rights to Perfect Blue when he made Black Swan. So
even if it wasn't a direct inspiration, there are definitely some ideas that are very clearly similar in the two films. And
for sure,
another fact that I added to the outline was that Aronofsky not only owns the Perfect Blue rights for the American version, but he also met before, of course, he unfortunately passed away. He met with Satoshi Kon and to discuss the idea of remaking the movie with Aronofsky as a director in a live-action version. So, even if Black Swan isn't directly inspired by this, there's definitely a lot of it in there.
I just think it's interesting that he denied. He denied that it was inspired by it. Like, just say, sure, yeah, I took some inspiration from it. There's no harm in it.
Yeah. But, peculiar character, Aronofsky.
He's a unique guy.
Yeah.
So on the outline, we have our general thoughts on the movie. And Hugo, what you put here kind of ties in nicely with Black Swan. Do you want to go ahead into the fracture part? Go ahead.
Because to me, the main thing that the movie is portraying is the idea of fractured or dual identity. So
absolutely, yeah.
An individual that either because of a trauma or because of a very grave psychosis has different identities within the same story, and either it's kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing, such as this movie where things happen and she doesn't remember that she's done it, and but she's actually done it while she was in the other personality. Or there is more literal versions of this, which is, in the outline I cite David Lynch, because David Lynch, the vast majority of what he did, there are doppelgangers, there are characters who swap names and character in the middle of the movie. Yeah, Mulholland Drive. In Lost Highway, you literally, one actor becomes another actor and it is the same character. It's so that's something that is very, very, it's kind of a recurring theme of this genre, of the psychological thriller slash drama, which is the idea of a character, either two identities blending into one, or a character having multiple identities that for some reason are either sort of enemies or at least they're fractured in some way. And it's something that is explored in a lot of David Lynch films, but also in films like Sunset Boulevard, in Persona that we talked about last week. Fight Club is another very clear example, and of course Black Swan, which might be the closest thing to this movie specifically.
Yeah, I think you're definitely. I think you definitely hit it on the head there with the fractured identity kind of thing, because, like I said, the premise of the movie is that this pop idol, changes trajectories and becomes an actress, but her pop idol persona and image remains a character, even though she has theoretically left that behind. And you talk about Black Swan. There are several sequences of Black Swan where Natalie Portman is dancing in front of a mirror, and her reflection starts to move independently of her, and it's kind of the idea of two different characters. And you see that they use that literal imagery a few times in Perfect Blue, where Mima will be on the train, her reflection in the train window is her pop idol self.
That's literally the screenshot I have up right now.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, great. But yeah, what I thought about this, to get a little deeper into the fractured dual identity thing that Hugo was just talking about, is this movie really hits the virgin whore dichotomy. Because Mima is in the opening, she's this pop idol and she's kind of infantilized. Am I reading too much into it to say that she's infantilized?
No. That's part of. I was going to say, we're in Japanese, idol culture. That is a very common thing. Is they're pure? Their idols are pure.
They're dressed in white. Yes. Their hair is done up, and just the way they sing and the way they move is a little infantilized. And then she leaves that behind to become an actress. And in the second scene she's in this TV show is a big rape scene, and she is suddenly sexualized as opposed to infantilized. And then shortly after that, she does a photo shoot with a guy who is notorious for getting models to take their clothes off, and she does take her clothes off. And so there's this big photo shoot where she's nude. And those two sequences, the rape scene in the TV show and the nude photo shoot, become really the crux, the narrative thrust moving forward is people's reaction to that, and how some fans apparently don't like that she did sexualized things and prefer her infantilized pop idol version of herself, and the clash there, the contrast there is what drives the story moving forward. And I think that's interesting, particularly given Britney Spears is currently in the news again and in cultural consciousness, and how she was just the virgin whore dichotomy of every teen pop star in the late 90s is I think there's an uncomfortable reckoning happening right now, and I think this movie kind of plays in that sandbox a little bit.
Yeah.
100%.
And another thing that to jump off what you said, another thing that this movie made me think about is it's kind of a movie about toxic fandom before toxic fandom was a thing as a concept.
Exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah, fandom that has ownership of the product and doesn't realize that there's people behind it, and when it doesn't go the way that they want, they create a storm.
They lash out.
And well, in this movie, and lash out. In this movie, very literally, stuff happens that is very tragic.
I've already thrown out the spoiler warning if you want to do it, because we were talking about her
because the movie eventually is not only about her fractured identity, but it also becomes a thriller. There are also some murders that happen, and there's this kind of stalker character that somehow it feels like he's kind of communicating with the other version of her, so the pure pop idol.
And he is communicating with the other version of her in a way.
Kind of through this third
she is
character
too,
that also
to
has
an
psychosis and believes that, and she is too through the computer for sure.
You mentioned the obsessive fans and like the fans feeling ownership of the things that they are fans of. Like I mentioned in the Virgin Horde thing, is that when she becomes more sexualized as an actress, a lot of her fans don't like that and prefer the more pure version of her as a pop singer. And there's a website called Mina's Room that Mima goes to several times and reads. It's basically like someone posing as Mima, writing like diary entries as her. And it's not her, obviously, but it is a fan literally like feeling enough ownership of her to like write a diary entry from her perspective. And that diary stuff is like, I wish I was still a pop star. I don't like doing this sexualized stuff. And then Mima starts to interact with that, and like she actually sits down at the computer and says, "So how is your day today?" As if like that's a parallel version of her living a different life, and she's checking in on herself to some extent.
Well, and the person who's creating that site, part of the thriller aspect, is taking actual photos of Mima in her actual day-to-day life, like going shopping and things like that, and posting them on there.
Stalker.
So, but that's the thing, is he's not the person that the man that I have on screen right now, the super fan. He's not the one actually controlling the website. Right. He's visiting the website and taking cues from the website to do things. But the person who's actually doing it is the ultimate villain of the movie, and I was surprised.
Me too.
But I was going to say, like, so I did want to talk about, did we have difficulty determining what was real and what was a dream? And like, I see Josh, of course, said yes, but it's by design. What do you mean there, Josh?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's just like a lot of kind of misdirects and narrative head fakes where like, you'll see Mima like kind of experiencing what appears to be a delusion, or having conversation with like a doctor about the thing she's seeing, and then it turns out like that's actually just part of the show that they're filming. And so there are dream sequence narrative head fakes where like you see something happen and it turns out to not have been real. And then there's also like the TV show narrative head fakes where something happens and you think it's having to do with a stalker or her delusion of her pop idol self, but it just turns out to have been them filming something. So it kind of knocks you off balance repeatedly by like showing you something and then being like, oh no, that's not actually happening right now for whatever reason. So you're kind of like constantly wondering if what you're seeing is real or fake.
And I think for the most part, I think for the most part, everything was quote unquote real. It either happened in the TV show, like that they were recording, so it happened in that they were acting it out, or it actually happened and it was just her other persona was in control, or things like that. Like for instance, the one that Josh brings up in our notes is, did the attack by Me-Mania actually happen? Like where she eventually hits him with the hammer. Well, we see that he is dead in a pile at the end. So he's dead.
but
But
who killed him?
But he's dead in a pile without an eye, so he's been. It does seem like he's been stabbed with the little.
Oh, I thought he got.
Thing. I don't
thought
know what
he
you
got
call it in English.
hit in the eye with the hammer.
I think
he got
it's
hit in the
a
side
bit
of the head with the
unclear,
hammer.
and
In the sequence we see.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then when you see him dead, you can see his eyes as being poked out like the other victims. But here's my thing. I think it doesn't matter, because I think it is a thing with this style of film that there are sequences that you don't know whether they're real or not. But it doesn't really matter because what the film is trying to portray is the psychosis of the characters. So it's putting you into their shoes. They don't know what's real and what isn't. So you don't.
So we
know
don't get to know
is
either.
real
Yeah, I
and
mean
what
that's
isn't.
a good point.
So we don't get to. And I think it was really effective until it wasn't. And I think the thing that was a little too much for me was the waking up scenes. I think there were too many scenes of her waking up in her bed. It happens in the span of 10 minutes. It happens like 5 times. And I thought that was a bit much. And I really enjoyed it when they did, oh, this scene fits with her story. And they film it as if it was her story. And then it turns out it's the show. Those were the fake outs that I really did like. But kind of the waking up all the time, I think it was unnecessary. You could have shown these different sequences and portrayed that psychosis without having to do the wake up scene. Or you could have done it once.
I do think that the repetition of that waking up
Yeah.
was to emphasize that not only is she losing sight of what's real and what's not, she's also losing track of time entirely.
Yes, and I get that, but I think they did it one too many times. That's
I can agree with that.
what I mean. Yeah.
So
And also, and do we want to talk about like the ending twist?
yeah, so that's what I was
Because
going to say
think-
next. Was that's where I kind of fell off on the movie a little bit, is because this felt like
Me too.
it came out of nowhere. That it turns out that the pop idol
one of
version
her agents.
is her agent, who we learn in the
Yes.
movie was a former idol herself. And so that it makes sense that she was wanting to relive that idol thing and was living vicariously through Mima. And so when she started doing all these acting things, it messed up her mind as well. So really what we're dealing with is psychosis in 2 characters, but we're only getting to live it through one of them. So that's what makes this ending kind of come out of nowhere. I don't hate it because it is kind of interesting. What do you think, Josh?
I don't love it. I think this seems like the kind of thing that this seems like a first draft idea to me, where you pitch it and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. That's a good twist. But then if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, it doesn't make any sense at all. The fact that like you said, Grizz, there's psychosis in 2 different people, but it's not only psychosis in 2 different people. It is matching psychosis completely independent of each other, which is a bit of a bridge too far, in that Mima is having delusions of her pop idol self being separate from her, and also Rumi, her agent, is also having delusions of Mima's pop idol self being Mima, exactly, or Rumi is Mima. And the fact that they're having the same delusion independent of each other, and then their delusions begin to interact again, doesn't make any sense to me, and they don't really address why that would be, and they kind of don't really have time to. They just kind of reveal, hey, Rumi has actually been posing as Mima the pop idol and also been killing people, and now the movie's over, so don't think about it too hard. Yeah.
Go ahead, Hugo.
And to me it's not just that it doesn't make sense in terms of them having the same delusion at the same time, which is kind of a bit much, but it kind of changes one of the themes of the film for me, because one of the themes of the film for me was the male producer and the male dominated industry that pushes this young actress into doing roles that are very out there and doing things that she doesn't necessarily want to do in order to become famous, heavily sexualizing her. And there's a scene where she breaks down and says, "Oh, of course," to herself. She says, "Of course, I didn't want to do the rape scene, but what am I going to do? I'm in front of the studio, and I have to make it as an actress. I kind of didn't have a choice."
Yeah, this
and
movie
to me that the female producer was the character that was trying to protect her from the misogyny that was inherent to that situation, and removing her from that role kind of lessened that aspect of the movie, aside from it not really making sense narratively.
Okay, so two things on that. One, I don't think she was so much protecting her from the misogyny as it was she was protecting the idle lifestyle that she was living
Yes,
vicariously through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's
Exactly.
that.
But initially, I thought she was protecting her from the misogyny, and I liked that element.
Yes,
but then
I agree.
Once you know, it kind of changes. Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason that resonates so much with us is because we are in a post-Me Too movement world. And I just say post, like it's begun. More revelations will continue to happen. That movement's far from done. But
Yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting that, in 1997 they made a movie about, misogyny and taking advantage of women as actresses, and especially young women and things like that. And
In Japan.
And
Yeah.
now looking at it with kind of how our eyes have been more opened to a lot of these things. Like, I'm sure that on some level most people were probably aware that actors and actresses have to do things to get roles that but we probably weren't fully aware of the extent to which they were being forced to do things. And so this movie is kind of prophetic, in that way. And I think that's why that particular theme resonates so well with us now. What you got, Josh?
Well, I'm not sure that is it ever implied in the movie that she has to do something untoward in order to get a role or anything?
I don't think it's directly.
I don't think
it's
so.
not like they say that you have to do this, but they say that you should do this because you'll get more scenes. You'll get, like, if you agree to do this rape scene, you're going to have a bigger role in the show going forward.
They're pushing her comfort level for what she's willing to be in on camera, but there's never any like behind the scenes thing where she's like, any like quid pro quo kind of thing.
Yeah, so maybe we're reading into it. I felt it was kind of implied that, she was doing these things to get ahead in the industry, but they are not things that she actually wanted to do, and so in a way she is kind of being forced to do these things.
I agree.
Yeah, but
I agree.
But I understand what Josh's distinction is. Like, she wasn't being forced. Like, it isn't portrayed or it isn't implied, I think, that she was forced to do stuff outside of the show business aspect.
Right.
Of it. That's what.
However,
I think that was what Josh was saying, but still.
Yeah, that's true. But what I do want to mention is that she is uncomfortable with the rape scene, and she's kind of talked into it. And I just want to mention that it's a really intense rape scene. Like, it's among, like, as portrayed in the movie, it's among the most intense rape scenes I've ever seen in a movie. Very graphic, even though it is like in the context of them like filming a TV show. So there's like, I guess they kind of soften it a little bit, like the fact there's a layer of facade. They keep cutting and moving the camera, but like, even so, I feel her discomfort.
That makes
both, it's rough. It's a rough scene to watch. Like, very, very rough and very intense.
And I think it brings out something that we were talking about at the beginning, which is anime being able to do stuff that Western animation would never, be able to even attempt. Like, the fact that they were telling this story and that they did that scene, and to see her discomfort as
even
she
a
was
live
just
action
lying
movie.
there.
Yeah, we wouldn't
Even
do
a
that
live
in a
action
live
movie
action
would not
movie.
do it. Yeah,
Well,
like this. It's a very intense scene that, again, it's among the most intense rape scenes.
Like live action. There have been, just look at Girl with the Dragon Tattoo from David Fincher, which we talked about. Like,
True.
There's a very, very, very intense.
The Girl with the Dragon
rape
Tattoo
scene,
and the Accused, which is literally about a rape. That's like the whole premise of the movie. Like, those are the only two I can think of that are in the same ballpark as this.
For sure. Yeah, it's very, very disturbing, and I think the movement of the camera almost makes it worse because you feel all of her discomfort with it. Even the male actor saying, "I'm so sorry about this." It's kind of pointing, a reflector, like a light against, exploitative television that will do anything to get the ratings.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, so
Very disturbing movie.
I think we should probably go ahead and move on to ranking these, if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go into our film to remember rankings. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll start with number 10. We have Jackie Brown. 9, Mank. 8, Another Round. 7, Rudy.
Yep.
6, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. 5, It's a Wonderful Life. 4, The Departed. 3, The Thing. 2, Boogie Nights. 1, Citizen Kane. So let's start with your name. Where do we want to put that on the ranking? Obviously, I've said this is one of my all-time favorite movies, so it's going to be very high.
I'd rather
for me.
hear what you two. I'd rather hear what you two would where you two would put it before I say anything.
So
My immediate instinct would be Below the Thing, Above the Departed. Just me personally. But
yeah,
I could, or maybe Below the Departed. That's the area.
The Departed also
go
being
right.
one of my top 4 favorite movies of all time, it is very tough for me. But I think in general, I enjoy watching Your Name more than basically any other movie, except for basically any movie, because it's a feel good. It's something I can watch over and over again anytime, and I still get to enjoy stuff about it. So for me, I would probably put it above The Departed. I'd probably put it below Citizen Kane. Would be where I would put it.
Okay. Josh?
I'm far lower than both you two, but I'm
Fair
outvoted
enough.
anyway, so it's just a matter of you two deciding where to put it.
Okay. Then I'm the second highest.
Yeah, so then we put it...
yeah.
Where did you want it? After The Departed? Or after The Thing?
I would go after The Thing, honestly, because there are so many other Scorsese films that I like more than The Departed that are kind of...
Cool.
We're eventually going to do another Scorsese film.
So now let's rank
Yeah.
Perfect Blue.
Perfect Blue.
Because now...
This one's more interesting because I think all of us kind of agree on this movie that there are some really great things about it. That the fact that it is even able to do this kind of story at the time and in animation form, it's kind of, impressive that they would even go for this. But at the same time, there are some elements that kind of don't work.
I was really high
particularly
on
in the
this
end.
movie until the ending. And
before the final 10 minutes, I think.
so
I was
unfortunately
much higher on it than I am.
So Hugo, where do you got it?
I either above or below Sugarland Express, I think.
I would
So, yeah.
I would probably put it above. I would put it above Matrix Reloaded, but below Jackie Brown.
Okay. Josh?
Somewhere in the bottom 3. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't really know exactly where, but somewhere down there.
So then,
So it's up to me and you to decide above or below Sugarland Express.
It's up for you and me or you and Grizz?
no, you and
No, you and
Josh.
me.
Oh,
You and me,
okay.
Josh.
Um,
Yeah. What do you think?
Below Chilean Express.
okay,
Okay.
there it is.
So there you go.
Perfect.
Perfect
Blue. Okay, so that's our film to remember rankings. You'll never hear Perfect Blue in our countdown again because we're only counting down the top 10. Okay.
So, Josh, what are we doing next week?
Well, real quick, I just wanted one last question. Josh, what do you think of anime films? You going to watch more of it?
If you guys suggest them, yes, but I'm not going to seek out much more, I don't think.
Okay.
But
Well,
I'll
we
work
gave
my
it a
way through
shot.
the Ghiblies, but yeah.
Honestly, by the way, if you like Inception, watch Paprika by
Paprika.
the same director of Perfect Blue. I promise you it's not as unsatisfying as this, and it's a really, really, really cool movie.
I do like
I think,
Inception.
if you like Inception,
Hot take.
you're going to like it.
Okay.
Very, very, clear inspiration.
All right, Josh, what are we talking next week?
Next week, we're going to watch a movie that I expect will do well at the Golden Globes, which are airing tonight, and a movie that I expect will get a lot of Oscar nominations in a couple weeks when those are announced, and that is The Trial of Chicago 7, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin on Netflix worldwide. Came out a few months ago, right? Like October, November-ish time frame. I've seen it a couple times. I think, Grizz, you've seen it at least once or
Yep.
twice. And
My top movie from 2020.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it will. Yeah, I think it'll be an important awards movie, and it's a movie that I've wanted to discuss with people since I saw it. So let's discuss Trial of Chicago 7 next week, and maybe for our main topic, we can talk about a favorite of mine, a favorite of Grizz's, Aaron Sorkin and his work. So yeah,
Very
it'll be
excited about that.
Good episode next week.
Okay, well, so that'll be it for this week. Thanks everyone for watching or listening. Really appreciate it. Again, as always, like, subscribe, share, and comment. Would love to hear more from you guys. And if you have some, other cinephile friends, maybe suggest us to them.
Share the
It'd be really,
podcast.
really helpful. So yeah, so thank you so much, and we will see y'all next time.